ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music, and more.
Hi, I'm Patricia Carvelis, the host of Politics Now. And sometimes it can be hard to cut through all the noise from the Canberra bubble. But on the Politics Now podcast, bursting it wide open is our core business. I'm joined by the brightest minds at the ABC to break down the polly-speak and have a chat about what's actually going on behind the scenes. It's called Politics Now, and you can find it on ABC Listen.
Donald Trump's MOU with Iran was meant to stop and then end the war. But now it's barely worth the paper it's written on. Bombing has resumed, the Strait of Hormuz is largely closed, and now the conflict is expanding with a blockade of the Red Sea. So, is this what a forever war looks like? Today, Aaron David Miller, a former Middle East negotiator with the US State Department, on the limited options Donald Trump has left. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily.
Munitions rained down on a port in the Iranian city of Bandar Abbas. The US president says as far as he's concerned, the ceasefire agreement is over.
There's something wrong with them. They're cuckoo. As far as I'm concerned, it's over.
Donald Trump ordered strikes against Iran for the 9th consecutive night. This video appears to show the Iranian missile strike that killed at least 2 American soldiers over the weekend. The unidentified remains of a third person have also been found in the area, while another American was killed in northern Iraq.
Aaron, let's start back on June the 14th, which happened, of course, to be Donald Trump's 80th birthday. This is when the United States and Iran came up with this MOU, which has not stood the test of time.
Yeah, it was signed virtually. I think the date was June 17. I'm sure the president wanted it to be on his birthday.
Yes.
I'm very happy to say the deal's all signed. And the strait is already partially open, because you never know what happens. But I think it's going to be open, and I think it's going to be free sailing.
Look, this was a hastily, badly negotiated document. It's more a memorandum of misunderstanding than it is a memorandum of understanding. The Iranians clearly had better negotiators and lawyers than the American team. Paragraph 5 all but conceded the notion that Iran and Oman will have joint administration over the Straits of Hormuz. It basically gave the Iranians a lifting of the naval blockade, a cessation of hostilities, and an unsanctioning of Iranian oil in exchange for no concessions from the Iranians. It was only a matter of time before this thing cratered.
Yeah, Clause 5 of that MOU, as you note, about the Strait of Hormuz, that really has caused a problem, hasn't it? Because it was so open to interpretation. The language was so imprecise in that clause.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. The Iranians weaponized geography. They have made proximity a vulnerability. And the straits are now, in their view, the key to maintaining deterrence, leverage, and maybe even a cash cow. I think they may be overplaying their hand. It is a strategy ultimately over time that will backfire, because the oil producers and the exporters will find alternative means of delivery to bypass the straits. The Saudis and the Emiratis already have alternative pipelines, but it may take 4 or 5 years to deal with these pipelines. That's the downside of what the Iranians are doing.
But just noting as well, Aaron, that after this MOU was signed, it was a great opportunity for Iran to get its oil out. And it did that, didn't it? It took the opportunity to make a lot of money in a short period of time.
Yep, over the course of the last month. And they also have now more storage capacity, which is now built up, which will see them through, if this lasts 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. Eventually, it will undermine the Iranian economy. But what is eventually? We're now July 28th, I think it's the beginning of the fifth month of this war. It could easily go on. This new normal could easily last several more months. There is this notion, and I don't know, I understand the logic. I just don't think I think the Iranians are mistaken, that in fact Trump is under pressure because of the midterms in November to somehow settle this. I don't buy that. He's not on the ballot. And I think it's quite clear, even before this, that the Republicans were going to suffer significant losses. So I think Trump will blame the party. He'll blame bad candidates. I don't see how, given his ego, how he can get out of this without gaining some advantage. And right now, I don't see what that advantage is.
The stakes, though, are increasing, are they not, for Donald Trump, given we have seen more American soldiers dying? 3 members of the military were killed on the weekend alone, and apparently the number injured is potentially higher than we know of.
Right. No, I think that's right, as is the destruction that the Iranians have caused to military bases. I think the administration is not being transparent on that. But 16, 17 Americans killed in a war that lasts 5 months is not going to bring pressure to end it. This is not Vietnam. I think he's willing to stay with this until he could figure out a way to claim success. But I just don't see how he does that.
Right. And as you say, Iran has shown its capability to continue to disrupt the region, hitting a power plant in Kuwait, for instance. And now the Iran-backed Houthis are expanding the conflict into the Red Sea. How concerned should we be about that?
That's just another choke point that is going to represent, again, a weaponization of geography. Geography is destiny when it comes to the Middle East. It really is. It's, in my judgment, one of the often ignored aspects of why a nation behaves the way it does is literally where they are. I mean, when the Iranians decide they're going to weaponize geography, how we miss that? Every intelligence assessment assumed, and I left the government 20 years ago, but more than almost 25 years ago, I guarantee you that CIA analysis, INR analysis, basically said that if you mount a major campaign against Iran, which they will interpret as being an effort to change the regime, they will block the straits. And why no one thought this through is one of the great I can't believe it about this war.
Well, Aaron, let's consider now whether this could become a so-called forever war. There are really only 2 options open to Donald Trump right now, aren't there? He either comes up with a new MOU, a new deal of some sort, or he keeps the war going. They're the only 2 things, right?
Yeah, escalation or negotiation. There is extrication, which is the third option. That is to say, basically declare victory and go home. But as we discussed, I don't think that's an option for him, because I think it would result in humiliation. It would be a lasting stain on his legacy. There's a variation of escalation, which is an escalation which no longer draws a difference or distinction between military targets and civilian ones. You've seen some of it, but if he does that on a massive scale, the Iranians will in turn respond by striking Gulf civilian infrastructure, which they've done already, and energy infrastructure. And you've noticed, by the way, that the attacks the Iranians have conducted have left out the Saudis and the Emiratis. They're going after 3 countries, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan, all of which host U.S. military bases. The truth is the Saudis and the Emiratis do too, but they are too important to the Iranians, I think. And they want to preserve those relationships. So there's still a degree of restraint even though the rhetoric is tough, which could leave open the door to negotiations. But again, as we mentioned before, the idea is not just to get to the negotiating table. The idea is to get to the negotiating table in a serious way.
And negotiating a new deal, Aaron, that would require trust. And there doesn't look like there's much trust on either side. I mean, Donald Trump describes the Iranian negotiators as, his word, scum.
Because they're scum. That's the way they act. And that's the way they've done it for 47 years. But I'm doing what's right for the country. I'm doing really what's right for the world. They have to be.
That's why, in the end, in my view, this is another round in a half century of conflict between the Islamic Republic and the United States. There's no end state here. There's no peace deal. And unless the regime is changed and the character of a repressive, authoritarian, brutal regime, which murders, imprisons, and tortures its own people by the thousands, and has an expansive view of what Iranian national security interests are, and wants to influence Lebanon, Iraq, I think that in some variation, even if this calms down, we'll be doing this again.
Well, Aaron, Donald Trump, he did want this war to be over. Of course, we mentioned ahead of the midterms in November. But there are also those within the United States that don't want it to be over, aren't there? And J.D. Vance, the Vice President, he was interviewed by the conservative podcaster Joe Rogan. He accused some members of the Israeli government of trying to influence American opinion to prolong this war.
There are some people within their system we know beyond a shadow of a doubt who are manipulating and trying to change American public opinion to keep the war going on indefinitely. Again, not towards any objective, but just indefinitely.
Not everybody wants it to end.
Yeah, and Netanyahu is probably at the top of the list. Look, J.D. Vance is campaigning. He has a white Christian nationalist constituency. But if you look at the U.S.-Israeli relationship, despite all of the anger and the criticism, not much has changed. I mean, the U.S.-Israeli relationship is military assistance, it's intelligence sharing, it's research and development, R&D, it's joint exercises, it's defending Israel at the UN and in international forum. None of that has changed under Biden and even under Trump.
All right, well, Aaron, tell me, what do you think? Can we call this the beginning of a forever war?
I mean, the Israelis and the Iranians are in a forever war, and Trump has interceded in this forever war. Iraq and Afghanistan were the two longest wars in American history. Ukraine is now in his fourth year and shows no signs of abating. You have two examples here of larger powers. Russia could not break Ukraine in 4 years, and Donald Trump could not break Iran in 4 months. Invading and attacking a smaller country can be complicated. I mean, what's a forever war? I mean, you could argue the Cold War lasted, from 1945 until the late 80s. The Israel-Iran war, you could argue, was a forever war, but it's not every day, right? We were in Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years, the two longest wars in American history, where the standard for victory was never could we win, but when could we leave, and what would we leave behind? I mean, 20 years deploying scores of thousands of American ground troops and military assets. In the end, forever's a long time, right?
But a much longer war than Donald Trump had anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, he said 4 to 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. Now we're moving on to 5 months. And it shows no signs of abating. But, this conflict could ease, as it did on June 17th when the MOU was signed, for a month. It could start up again. This could be the new normal. And I suspect, unless something changes, it may well be.
Aaron David Miller is a former Middle East negotiator with the US State Department, working across Republican and Democratic governments. He's now a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Audio production for this episode was by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is Sydney Peat. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.